Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the 423 Football Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Bouchard, and it's just me today, and I'll explain that a little later in the show. But first things first, we've decided that providing listeners with just one show per week, it puts a lot of pressure and information into one show, just cramming that into one show, and there's just too much football to cover in that short amount of time. We want to be able to provide the best and the most information possible. So that being said, we decided to provide more episodes throughout the week and hopefully even more information on social media. Like I said, it's just me today. No Peyton or Brett. Those two guys have actual jobs and are actually in the real world. They've done graduated college and everything. I'm still a lonesome college student delivering pizza on the side, so I clearly have more time to dedicate to my one true love, which is fantasy football. So we're going to attempt, like I said, a weekly change of schedule. We plan on still providing our feature-length episode, usually around an hour long, on Wednesdays, but we will attempt to add two shorter bonus episodes, if you will. One on Tuesday featuring a review of the previous week. The reason we weren't going to make the review of the week as long as the preview, because everyone saw what happened. We're just going to go through, basically give you news and a review of what happened. And the preview, that's the real value from our show. You get to find out what our rankings are and who we like going into the next week. And then we'll add a show, which will be this show, our Thursday show, that will focus mainly on our own specific league of record, our KPT BALLAS league, where we'll give out weekly awards, do some trash talking, and hopefully have a few guests on the show. I know there's a few people already lining up to come join us here at the 423. And hopefully all these episodes will better our show and give you even more knowledge in the fantasy football realm. So, like I said, this show, it's going to focus on our league today. But first of all, we'll jump into the news. We want to have news in every show, mainly just to provide, like I said, even more information to go off of, and things happen every single day. So us being able to provide news on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, as well as on social media throughout the entire week, will expand the information given out to the listeners. So that being said, jumping into the news. First things first, we got to talk Ezekiel Elliott. We've been talking about him for weeks now. So yesterday, if you listened to our last episode, you heard the Zeke news break on the show. The 6-game suspension has been upheld. So I'm just going to go through. I'm not a lawyer or anything like that, but I'm just going to go through and break down the entire scenario of what could happen with Zeke and what is happening with Zeke right now. So, yeah, first things first, the NFL arbitrator, Harold Henderson, upheld the 6-game suspension. So, just right off the bat, you think it's just going to be 6 games, okay, he's going to serve the 6-game suspension and roll out. That's not the case. It's a lot more complicated than that. Zeke will actually play Week 1 this coming week against the Giants on Sunday Night Football. The only reason that happened was because the decision by Mr. Henderson was not made before the 4 p.m. deadline that the league usually has on Tuesdays. I guess that's just for like game planning and like could just throw off a team's rhythm basically during the week. So they're not going to put that pressure on the Cowboys to not play Zeke when they were already prepping for this week. So yes, he will be on the field for week 1. So all Zeke owners, roll him out there. All Darren McFadden owners, just leave McFadden on the bench. He's not going to be much of a use this week. But yeah, continuing with the Zeke news, the NFL Players Association, they have filed a temporary restraining order to block the suspension. This was filed last week, but now that this suspension has been upheld by Harold Henderson, the restraining order is actually going to be, well, not in effect, but they're having a hearing to decide whether the restraining order to block the suspension will go through. So yeah, that's going to come down. Hopefully we'll have that news by Friday. Judge Amos Mazant, I'm probably butchering that name, but the judge will decide whether to uphold or deny the restraining order. So if he denies the restraining order, Zeke will be suspended games 2 through 7 of this season. That will happen. And he'll be eligible to return week 9, not week 8, week 9 after their bye. So their bye is week 8. He'll be able to come back week 9. That's if, like I said, if the judge denies the restraining order. If the restraining order is upheld, if he approves it, then most likely Zeke will play the entire season. You'll have him for full 16 games. You're good to go. Roll him out there. Obviously, that's great to know for pretty much anyone who's drafted Zeke up until this point, because no one's really had to take him in the first round. He's been dropping in the second and third round, so the value is ridiculous. However, with all this coming, the whole suspension thing in general, Zeke still plans, regardless of the decision, on filing a lawsuit to lift the suspension, because even if the restraining order is upheld, I guarantee the league's going to still come after Zeke and try to get a suspension at some point. So Zeke plans on filing a lawsuit to completely negate any type of suspension in the future, which that could lead into next season. We saw it with Tom Brady or I guess it was last year, yeah, and carried over from 2 years ago, really. Tom Brady with Deflategate, he gets suspended, not the year he's supposed to be suspended, but he gets suspended the next year, the 4 games. I'm starting to think that that's going to happen to Zeke. It's just a mess of a situation, really. It's just craziness on both sides. The NFL Players Association and Roger Goodell, they're just basically at war right now. And like I said, it's a mess. But say what you will about Goodell and his power and the NFLPA trying to negate any power he has. The NFLPA is at fault here too, because the recent collective bargaining agreement is what has given Roger Goodell all this power, and they agreed to the agreement, so they can't be, now they're whining that Goodell has all this power, even though they're the ones that agreed to it. So there's a little bit of blame on both sides, but when it comes down to the suspension, I do think that Zeke should honestly be suspended for the 6 games. Even though there hasn't been that clear of evidence of the actual domestic violence accusation, but you can't deny that Zeke's I should say attitude or his actions over the past year have not been up to the league standards. Obviously, you saw, or we had, like I said, the domestic violence issue. We have the issue or the video of him pulling down the girl's top on the boat. There's just a lot of messy situations that Zeke has put himself into, and I'm pretty sure that's the reasoning behind the attack on it, or why Goodell is going after him so hard. There is a clear definition of domestic violence in the the NFL's constitution, and it does say 6-game suspension for domestic violence. There's no variance there. It's just 6 games. So I do believe that Zeke should just honestly take the suspension, sit out the 6 games, come back, and he'll be fine for the rest of his NFL career as long as he stays out of trouble. So, yeah, it's going to be something we monitor for week to week this season and maybe even into next season. So, yeah, we've definitely got to keep an eye on the Ezekiel Elliott situation. So, moving on from that, Hurricane Irma. We got to talk about the hurricane. Obviously, we had the hurricane. We had to Hurricane Harvey in Houston that they were just recently trying to recover from that. Just shout out to J.J. Watt. So much of help from J.J. Watt going towards Houston. I think over $18 million right now that he's raised for the Houston community. That's just major. You have J.J. Watt is all you can say about him. Just class act. It's incredible what he's doing. But we got to look at now. Hurricane Irma. It's coming in. It's supposed to make landfall sometime this weekend. It's already a Category 5. I've seen pictures lately of the comparison of its size in Florida, and it could basically just encompass the entire state. So just first and foremost, just anyone down in the Florida area, be safe. Try to evacuate it if you can. I know there's a bunch of just bull basically going on right now where flights are $1,000 one way, and not everybody can afford that. That's just absolutely ridiculous. But yeah, I won't go down that road. That'll just make me mad. But yeah, everyone stay safe down there. So moving on from that into the implications the hurricane has on football. The Buccaneers and Dolphins game, it was supposed to be moved to a neutral site or a different day this weekend. That was the original report. They were thinking about playing that game in Atlanta or Philly or Pittsburgh or something like that. But instead, they decided to move that game to Week 11. Honestly, I really don't like that decision at all. I think they should have just played it at a neutral site this weekend because it screws a lot of things up. Obviously, those two teams this is their bye week. They don't get a bye week in Week 11, which is where they would have had their bye week. So they're playing full 16 games in a row, and that's a tough stretch. A lot of people need breaks in the middle of the season. Going a full 16 games in a row, you got to be looking at some injury risks down the line. I know there's quite a few guys on both sides in both organizations, on the Bucs side and the Dolphins side, that have been known to have injury problems, and playing a full 16 games in a row is not a good sign for that. I know people to keep an eye on. I wouldn't say you drop them in your rankings or anything like that, but people like maybe Jay Ajayi, keep an eye on. Doug Martin's never been the healthiest guy. Granted, he's going to be, or I'll talk about his suspension issue, or how this affects his suspension here in a second. But yeah, mainly for this week, obviously, Bucs and Dolphins not being played. Look for any Bucs and Dolphins in your lineup and make the adjustments. People, there are big-name players that are playing in this game that a lot of people have in their lineups. Mike Evans, Jameis Winston, Jay Ajayi, Jarvis Landry, Devontae Parker, Jay Cutler, the list goes on and on. So make sure those guys are out of your lineup and you make the adjustments. I won't go through the replacements at like quarterbacks You can look and receivers and tight ends. You can look on Twitter. We have our starts and sits on there, or you can go back to last show and kind of get an idea of who to start. But the running back position, that's where people are going to have the most trouble finding replacements because the position's scarce. You can't just go out on the waiver wire and pick up a starting running back to replace like Jay Ajayi. But if you're looking for some type of replacement that could be out there, might want to look at Wendell Smallwood, maybe Rex Burkhead, Chris Thompson, mainly guys that will possibly get some good work, or those third down backs, like I said, Chris Thompson and Rex Burkhead, maybe James White if he's available, Dion Lewis. You could always go for a Patriots back. One of them could blow up any week. But, yeah, you want to find a replacement for those Bucs and Dolphins players. And like I said before, Doug Martin, we know he has a 3-game suspension. So he was going to be suspended, obviously, first 3 weeks. But now this is treated as a bye, so this does not count as a game that he will be suspended for. He will actually come back week 5 instead of week 4. And so if you're looking as a Doug Martin owner, just be aware that you might have to have someone in there for Doug through or an extra week. If you were relying on him to come back that week 4, he will actually be coming back week 5. Okay, so those are the two biggest storylines so far. The Zeke news and the hurricane coming in. Again, stay safe. All those in along the Atlantic. Odell, though, still not practicing. Odell Beckham, he's still questionable with his ankle injury, and honestly, I'd say 50-50 whether he plays or not. Even he said he's more hopeful than confident that he will go out there and play against the Cowboys this week. So just keep an eye on that throughout the weekend. All right, so like I said, we kind of want to dedicate this Thursday show to our league specifically somewhat. I know we won't spend a lot of time on it, just mainly because we want to give our listeners a broad view of fantasy football, not just our league in specific. And hopefully, even we'll get have you guys send in some questions and everything about your own specific leagues, and we can compare and contrast to our league and things like that. But like I said, I'm gonna talk a little bit about our KPT BALLAS league. This is our league of record. We've been doing this league for probably a decade now. I've known most of these guys in this league for basically all my life. Some of these guys I've known since kindergarten, middle school, grown up with them through high school and college, and still stay in touch. Which is I like that because I like long-lasting leagues where some people, if people are moving away, you lose touch with them. This is a good way to stay in touch with those people. So not much really happening in our league thus far. Obviously, the season hasn't started, so we won't get into too much detail. But we did have 2 trades over the weekend. First trade between Joseph and Steele. Joseph traded away Jamal Charles and Mason Crosby. Steele traded away Steven Gostkowski and Jordan Matthews. So I'll just go ahead and say I don't think I've ever seen a trade that involved kickers. So that's a first, definitely in our league. That's a bit odd, but I know Steele has definitely been wanting Jamal Charles this offseason. He's always been a big fanboy of Jamal Charles, even back from his Texas days. So I guess if I was going to grade that trade, I'd say it'd be pretty even. Joseph getting a pass catcher, Steele getting a decent backup running back. And the kickers, honestly, just who cares? You can take one or the other, Gostkowski or Crosby. So that trade is just kind of meh. It's just whichever side you prefer. The next trade we have is between Kevin and Matt. Kevin traded away Leonard Fournette, and Matt traded away Carlos Hyde. So, bit of a shocker. A lot of people high on Leonard Fournette this year, the big fantasy rookie at the running back position. But honestly, I think it's a pretty fair trade in the fact that it's just more of what both of these guys want, what Kevin and Matt want. Kevin has been all about hoarding the rookie running backs this year. He did have Leonard Fournette, Christian McCaffrey, Joe Mixon. He had 3 of the top-tier fantasy rookie running backs. So I guess it was more of a risk factor having all those guys on the same roster. Obviously, Leonard Fournette's dealing with a foot injury right now, so we don't know what's going to happen there. I do think Leonard Fournette has much higher upside than Carlos Hyde, but Carlos Hyde definitely adds security to Kevin's team. And honestly, Carlos Hyde, he has been looking good. He's supposedly healthier than he's ever been, and he's a good back. He's definitely not a mediocre guy. He's a talented back. He can get it done. It's just really, can he stay healthy? Which I think hopefully this is the year he can. And again, Fournette is dealing with a foot injury right now, so Hyde definitely the safer guy. Fournette the higher upside guy. So like I said, not much going on till the season actually starts in the league. So I'm just going to go ahead and close it out. Like I said, these episodes are going to be fairly short compared to our Wednesday episode, I should say. So yeah, hopefully you all like the additional episode. Again, we want to provide as much fantasy knowledge as we can, and these episodes will help provide even more up-to-date news throughout the week. But to stay even more up-to-date, don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at the 423 Football, and like us over on Facebook. Twitter's probably the best way to get that quick, up-to-date information, so make sure you follow us over there. And tweet us your questions and comments. We'll try to answer them on the show or on Twitter. So yeah, thanks guys. Thanks for listening, and peace out.